Right, thank you. Welcome to the Employment Committee for the 26th of January. We have apologies from County Councillor David O'Toole, and County Councillor Jane Rear is attending in his place and throughout for the recruitment of the Executive Director. Disclosure of pecuniary and non-pecuniary interest. Do we have any? No? Before we move on to the agenda, just a couple of things to point out. So we intend to move item 8 to the open part of the meeting, and we also have an urgent item of business which will be taken at item 5. So minutes of the last meeting, which was held on the 6th of December. Are we happy to approve those minutes? Thank you. Item 4 is the Localism Act Pay Policy Statement 2022-23, and I'm going to ask Deborah Barrow, Head of Service and Resources, to take us through that.
Thank you, Chair. Committee will be familiar with this annual pay policy statement that we publish every April. There aren't many changes to it this time because mainly the inflationary increases haven't yet been confirmed. However, there are a couple of proposals relating to the foundation living wage I would like to present to committee. And you'll see in the recommendation 2 and 3, a slight change to the way they're presented in that when this report was submitted, matters have moved on in terms of the national pay negotiations in relation to the trade union's position on balance. And whilst they're not concluded, what I'm now suggesting is, rather than that suggesting an automatic delay, is that the council has the flexibility to consider a delay in applying the foundation living wage, which we normally do in April, should the national pay negotiations continue to be protracted. Just because that seemed to be a fair approach to consider the alignment of the two because of a particular long negotiation this time for the national pay increase. Clearly, it's backdated to the 1st of April, as will be the national pay increase. It just gives that flexibility to consider the potential tensions that might create for the large part of the workforce that would still be waiting to hear the outcome of those negotiations. The Living Wage Foundation are very sympathetic to local government employers at the moment. And the trade union understand the situation that the council faces. So it is simply to say, rather than automatically applying, just give the flexibility to consider a delay in applying it and backdate it. And we all remain hopeful that that won't be the case. So that's the first point. The second point is the council applies the method of payment for the foundation living wage as part of its pay structure. So it becomes always the minimum point of the pay grading structure. And as such, over a number of years, it has removed pay points, and we have now removed grades 1, 2 and into grade 3 in our pay structure as a result of the increases, which tend to be higher than the national pay increases. There is an option to apply it as a supplement, which essentially means the pay structure remains as is from here on in. And all staff would be subject to the national pay increases, and those eligible for the foundation living wage would receive it as a top up, as a supplement. So what I've put here in the report is to undertake a review of whether to move to a different method of payment. I have had the opportunity since this report was presented to talk to the trade unions at our JNCF last week and presented that consideration to them. And their initial response was that they couldn't see particular issues and were happy to enter into a review with us in order from April 2023, potentially move to the market supplement approach. So what I'm proposing there is that committee agree to moving to a market supplement subject to the outcome of the review and with the trade unions. And so in summary, I'm asking committee to recommend to full council the annual pay policy statement and those two amendments of the foundation living wage. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Has anybody got any points that they want to raise? Okay, Councillor Mein?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm quite surprised that the unions are happy for you to delay the payment of the upgrade to the foundation living wage, because people in receipt of that upgrade are by fact very, very, very low paid. And I think that, you know, the people in receipt of that need that money as soon as possible, especially given the exponential rise in cost of living, fuel. So that's one point. I'm surprised at it. But I'd like to know, what are the financial implications both to the council and to the individuals of moving to a market supplement?
There would be no difference in terms of the payments. It's just a different method of applying it, but it would still be the same rate.
What's the benefit to the council?
It would mean that our grading structure as it would cease being eroded, and eventually what would continue is each grade in our pay structure would erode the foundation living wage, would become that minimum point. So that breadth and range of our grading structure would be removed, and it potentially just narrows the range of our roles and responsibilities and grading structure across the council.
Don't think I quite get this. I might be missing something here. But if it means that because we're applying the foundation living wage, we're losing the lowest grades because they are less than the foundation living wage, why would we want to retain grades that are less than the foundation wage?
What we'd be doing is retaining the ability to still have a pay and grading structure and not flatten it. So although the pay remains the same, what we have less ability to have are a range of grades that we job evaluate and determine that for those roles and responsibilities, that comes out at a particular grade. The foundation living wage will erode the ability to have that correlation with the evaluation. Well, the foundation living wage would become that bottom level and then push everything up so that everything then above that eventually becomes the foundation living wage. We don't end up with grades that we've evaluated for certain roles in our organisation. They become the foundation living wage.
Instead of having to wait for contracted basic, so we've not had that. We still have that money in our account. So we want to pay as soon as possible. I mean, it's that we should be so it means that we can pay it regardless of any negotiation. So that is a good thing. So
yeah, I think the trade union view was that having all staff still part of national pay negotiations was a good thing, but recognising the foundation living wage would topple those staff eligible for it. So, and it didn't, a number of organisations apply it like that. And I think they're familiar with it in the sense that they know the supplement means the payment and the commitment to being a foundation living wage employer remains. It's just the different method of paying that.
So if I'm understanding both what yourself and Cllr Vincent said, if we pay it as a supplement, we can pay it in April, that supplement, and it wouldn't have to be backdated to April.
it's slightly conflated the two issues. The first issue is the ability to have the flexibility to consider delay the payment. The second is move towards a supplement from April 2023 on conclusion of the review with the trade unions. So they would be separate steps.
So this year they will be paid retrospectively then. Won't get the money.
Given where the national pay negotiations are moving forward, that flexibility may not be required. But it's been such a protracted negotiation, and as Cllr Vincent has said, staff waited nearly a year. It just seemed that it was perhaps more equitable in these particular circumstances this year to consider the timing of paying the foundation living wage in case those pay negotiations continue for longer than we all know at this point.
Oh, there we are. Thanks, Peter. Appreciate that. I had a conversation with you this morning about it, that explained it on the same basis. So happy to support that moving forward.
Thank you. So thank you for all those explanations. Any other questions or points anyone wants to raise? So on that basis, we're content to approve the 3 recommendations in the report. Thank you. Okay, so we will now move on to this is item 8, which is what we brought from the closed part of the meeting into this part of the meeting. It's about revised standby payments, and I think Deborah is going to take us through that as well. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is a proposal for committee to approve permanent changes to 2 remaining fixed rate payments in council's terms and conditions. Standby has been the main point of negotiations with the trade unions. Currently, our standby payment is subject to a minimum payment of £125 per week, or 20% of a week's pay. And the fixed payment has been fixed for 11 years. So the trade unions asked if we could consider looking at that, in particular for concerns raised by the trade unions and staff in highway service, and they make up 50% of claims for standby. So the key issue for them was that the frontline staff or the operatives were receiving fixed rate pay, and the management were receiving the 20% pay of a week's salary. And by virtue of being a week's salary, it was increasing alongside the national pay increases, and the fixed rate, as I've just said, has been the same for 11 years. So there was quite some sympathy with that position. And so the service with HR and the trade unions entered into negotiations and proposed what you have in front of you today. So essentially, it would be an increase of the fixed rate from £125 to £150, and also increase it in future in line with any national pay increases. The calculation of that has been based on a couple of issues. At Appendix A, you'll see that we've applied the national pay increases to the £125 had they been applied over 11 years, and therefore it would be now £140.7. So that was a sort of a benchmark minimum to say that would be the equitable position. The trade unions were keen to see that there was some parity between the rate the managers were getting on the 20% and the frontline staff. So the £150 is comparable with 20% of a week's pay for the average graded manager who receives standby. And that felt like that was a more rounded approach to payment. So the proposal would be to apply that new rate of £150 a week, which equates to £16.67 per unit of standby worked if you don't do a full week. Backdate that to the 1st of October 21, when the winter season started, considering the negotiations of being heavily around the highway service, and apply any future further increases to it. So we remove the fixed rate nature of it. We also took the opportunity to look at any other fixed rates, and there's one other which is called split shift. It's 5p for a split shift. So from April 22, proposing to apply further increases to that as well. And that would remove fixed rate allowances across the organisation. So I'm asking the Employment Committee to approve those recommendations.
Thank you. I know on various trips to depots and things, this is a big issue for a lot of our staff. So it's good to see this paper come through. I was surprised it's been 11 years since we looked at these things. Yeah, has anybody? Yes, Cllr Riggott.
Thank you. I was going to say, yeah, I'm actually not surprised, not disappointed it's 11 years because when it's resolved and we don't have any others, and if we ever had these scenarios again or policy design, I'd rather see them weighted towards benefits which towards the lower graded staff rather than the management. I think that's really poor actually, but I'm glad it's resolved.
Vincent?
Yeah, these guys do a great job for us.
Anybody else got anything else to say? No? In which case, I assume that we're very happy to approve these recommendations. Thank you. So we now have one item of urgent business, which everybody should have the papers for, which is temporary changes to staff terms and conditions due to the current Omicron coronavirus emergency circumstances. I'm not sure who's taking us through that. Is that you, Deborah, again? Got sufficient copies? There's another one here. Right. Okay, where you go, Deborah.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm presenting this on behalf of Louise Taylor, our Exec Director for Adults and Health and Wellbeing. And I'm sure you won't be surprised to hear that the Omicron variant has created great challenges for Louise Taylor's service and continues to do so. And it's adding pressure on our internal provider services in particular, and our support to external provider services due to staff absence through self-isolation, sickness absence. And although absence levels have just started to reduce, they're still quite a bit higher than they were before Christmas. So there are still pressures and issues that the service is having to respond to. And other options to explore additional resources have happened. This is one of another. And so in order to encourage volunteers to support rather than restrict them, essentially what Louise Taylor is asking for as a matter of urgent business is to temporarily change terms and conditions relating to overtime that you may recall were agreed in the first wave of the pandemic back in 2020. And it is to enable her to continue that response to support our community needs. And essentially what's being asked for is that there's a further lift of the overtime cap. Currently staff who are paid above 0.19 do not routinely receive overtime, they receive toil for extra hours worked. But it's not practical to accrue toil at this time. So it seems sensible to apply the ability to claim overtime if you're above that rate. But also, if you are able to be released as a staff volunteer to a different role, and if you're doing overtime on that role, rather than it be paid at the hourly rate of the role, to retain the hourly rate that the employee receives. Again, it's just to encourage people to come forward and not feel that they are not getting the rate for their own job whilst they're supporting us during a difficult time. And it's been asked to be effective from the 20th of December, when effectively action had to start to respond to the Omicron variant and to be reviewed at the end of February, when hopefully we'll be in a far more stable position. And that's the request from Louise Taylor as an urgent business item today.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Vincent.
It's a statement. Statement and step into the body that not anticipating just because they step into the I have seen it. It's taken. So interesting.
I mean,
Thank you. Yeah, I absolutely agree with this. Well, both parts of this, you know, if they're working overtime in a different area, and it's to help us out, then obviously they need to, the overtime should be calculated on a substantive. But I am a bit concerned about the health and well-being of our employees, because particularly in the area of social care, both adults and children, they've been working under such stress and continuous pressure for so long now. And I do hope that all vacancies are being filled as soon as they occur, and not waiting for 3 months until they see what happens. But vacancies should be being filled as soon as practically possible. And just concerned that, you know, our staff are receiving the right care and support to maintain their well-being.
very sensible, good points. And I think the difficulty is recruiting generally for many organisations, but you're right, we shouldn't be sitting back waiting to do so. Any other questions, comments? No, so happy to support. Thank you. So the next meeting is on Thursday, the 10th of March at 9 o'clock, followed by meetings on the 11th of March and the 14th of March, which are all to do with interviews and recruitment. And we've given notice to conduct notice in business in private. We've not had any representation. So is everybody happy for us to do that? Thank you. So we say goodbye to